The mere drudgery undergone by some men in carrying on their undertakings has been something extraordinary, but the drudgery they regarded as the price of success. Addison amassed as much as 3 folios of manuscript materials before he began his Spectator. Newton wrote his Chronology 15 times over before he was satisfied with it. And Gibbon wrote out his Memoir 9 times. Hale studied for many years at the rate of 16 hours a day, and when wearied with the study of the law, he would recreate himself with philosophy and the study of the mathematics. Hume wrote 13 hours a day while preparing his History of England. Montesquieu, speaking of one part of his writings, said to a friend, "You will read it in a few hours. But I assure you it has cost me so much labor that it has whitened my hair." The practice of writing down thoughts and facts for the purpose of holding them fast and preventing their escape into the dim region of forgetfulness, has been much resorted to by thoughtful and studious men. Lord Bacon left behind him many manuscripts entitled Sudden Thoughts set down for use. Erskine made great extracts from Burke. And Eldon copied Coke upon Littleton twice over with his own hand, so that the book became, as it were, part of his own mind. The late Dr. Pye Smith, when apprenticed to his father as a bookbinder, was accustomed to make copious memoranda of all the books he read, with extracts and criticisms. This indomitable industry in collecting materials distinguished him through life, his biographer describing him as always at work, always in advance, always accumulating. These notebooks afterwards proved, like Richter's quarries, the great storehouse from which he drew his illustrations. The same practice characterized the eminent John Hunter, who adopted it for the purpose of supplying the defects of memory. And he was accustomed thus to illustrate the advantages which one derives from putting one's thoughts in writing. "It resembles," he said, "a tradesman taking stock, without which he never knows either what he possesses or in what he is deficient." John Hunter, whose observation was so keen that Abernethy was accustomed to speak of him as the Argoside, furnished an illustrious example of the power of patient industry. He received little or no education till he was about 20 years of age, and it was with difficulty that he acquired the arts of reading and writing. He worked for some years as a common carpenter at Glasgow, after which he joined his brother William, who had settled in London as a lecturer and anatomical demonstrator. John entered his dissecting room as an assistant, but soon shot ahead of his brother, partly by virtue of his great natural ability, but mainly by reason of his patient application and indefatigable industry. He was one of the first in this country to devote himself assiduously to the study of comparative anatomy, and the objects he dissected and collected took the eminent Professor Owen no less than 10 years to arrange. The collection contains some 20,000 specimens, and is the most precious treasure of the kind that has ever been accumulated by the industry of one man. Hunter used to spend every morning from sunrise until 8 o'clock in his museum. And throughout the day he carried on his extensive private practice, performed his laborious duties as surgeon to St. George's Hospital and Deputy Surgeon General to the Army, delivered lectures to students, and superintended a school of practical anatomy at his own house, finding leisure, amidst all, for elaborate experiments on the animal economy, and the composition of various works of great scientific importance. To find time for this gigantic amount of work, he allowed himself only 4 hours of sleep at night, and an hour after dinner. When once asked what method he had adopted to ensure success in his undertakings, he replied, "My rule is, deliberately to consider, before I commence, whether the thing be practicable. If it be not practicable, I do not attempt it. If it be practicable, I can accomplish it if I give sufficient pains to it. And having begun, I never stop till the thing is done. To this rule I owe all my success." Hunter occupied a great deal of his time in collecting definite facts respecting matters which, before his day, were regarded as exceedingly trivial. Thus it was supposed by many of his contemporaries that he was only wasting his time and thought in studying so carefully as he did the growth of a deer's horn. But Hunter was impressed with the conviction that no accurate knowledge of scientific facts is without its value. By the study referred to, he learned how arteries accommodate themselves to circumstances, and enlarge as occasion requires, and the knowledge thus acquired emboldened him, in a case of aneurysm in a branch artery, to tie the main trunk where no surgeon before him had dared to tie it, and the life of his patient was saved. Like many original men, he worked for a long time, as it were, underground, digging and laying foundations. He was a solitary and self-reliant genius, holding on his course without the solace of sympathy or approbation, for but few of his contemporaries perceived the ultimate object of his pursuits. But like all true workers, he did not fail in securing his best reward, that which depends less upon others than upon oneself, the approval of conscience, which in a right-minded man invariably follows the honest and energetic performance of duty. Ambroise Paré, the great French surgeon, was another illustrious instance of close observation, patient application, and indefatigable perseverance. He was a son of a barber at Laval, in Maine, where he was born in 1509. His parents were too poor to send him to school, but they placed him as footboy with the curé of the village, hoping that under that learned man he might pick up an education for himself. But the curé kept him so busily employed in grooming his mule and in other menial offices that the boy found no time for learning. While in his service, it happened that the celebrated lithotomist, Codote, came to Laval to operate on one of the curé's ecclesiastical brethren. Paré was present at the operation, and was so much interested by it that he is said to have from that time formed the determination of devoting himself to the art of surgery. Leaving the curé's household service, Paré apprenticed himself to a barber surgeon named Violot, under whom he learned to let blood, draw teeth, and perform the minor operations. After 4 years' experience of this kind, he went to Paris to study at the School of Anatomy and Surgery, meanwhile maintaining himself by his trade of a barber. He afterwards succeeded in obtaining an appointment as assistant at the Hôtel Dieu, where his conduct was so exemplary, and his progress so marked, that the chief surgeon, Goupil, entrusted him with the charge of the patients whom he could not himself attend to. After the usual course of instruction, Paré was admitted a master barber surgeon, and shortly after was appointed to a charge with the French army under Montmorency in Piedmont. Paré was not a man to follow in the ordinary ruts of his profession, but brought the resources of an ardent and original mind to bear upon his daily work, diligently thinking out for himself the rationale of diseases and their befitting remedies. Before his time the wounded suffered much more at the hands of their surgeons than they did at those of their enemies. To stop bleeding from gunshot wounds, the barbarous expedient was resorted to of dressing them with boiling oil. Hemorrhage was also stopped by searing the wounds with a red-hot iron. And when amputation was necessary, it was performed with a red-hot knife. At first Paré treated wounds according to the approved methods. But, fortunately, on one occasion, running short of boiling oil, he substituted a mild and emollient application. He was in great fear all night lest he should have done wrong in adopting this treatment, but was greatly relieved next morning on finding his patients comparatively comfortable, while those whose wounds had been treated in the usual way were writhing in torment. Such was the casual origin of one of Paré's greatest improvements in the treatment of gunshot wounds. And he proceeded to adopt the emollient treatment in all future cases. Another still more important improvement was his employment of the ligature in tying arteries to stop hemorrhage, instead of the actual cautery. Paré, however, met with the usual fate of innovators and reformers. His practice was denounced by his surgical brethren as dangerous, unprofessional, and empirical, and the older surgeons banded themselves together to resist its adoption. They reproached him for his want of education, more especially for his ignorance of Latin and Greek, and they assailed him with quotations from ancient writers, which he was unable either to verify or refute. But the best answer to his assailants was the success of his practice. The wounded soldiers called out everywhere for Pare, and he was always at their service. He tended them carefully and affectionately. And he usually took leave of them with the words, "I have dressed you. May God cure you."